Now, a very momentous action item. The interlocal agreement between PSTA and Pinellas County, item 4A.
Yes, it is a momentous occasion. We've talked, this PSTA board has voted on legislative agenda priorities and itself to eliminate the PSTA ad valorem property tax if the Greenlight Pinellas sales tax is implemented. I've thought about a United States House of Representatives tactic of voting 400 times for something. Maybe that could show that we are definitely intent on eliminating the property tax, but something even better is this interlocal agreement that I'm here to recommend to you. The County Commission approved this interlocal agreement on June 3rd. The Planning Committee of PSTA reviewed this a week ago and reviewed it in some detail, and then I know some members even talked to Alan Zimmett, our General Counsel, further to get some questions answered, and we can answer any final questions today. I produced a one-page summary. The agreement is in your packet and is at your places, a paper copy, and then there's this one-page summary that I'm just going to quickly go over these 5 key points that are in the agreement. But you're welcome to ask any questions. Most importantly, number 1 is that this requires the elimination of the PSTA ad valorem property tax following the passage of the Greenlight Pinellas 1% sales tax. Not only does it require, does it not make any sense for a future PSTA board to levy a property tax because the county would reduce sales tax revenue by an equal amount, but it is essentially a penalty to PSTA if a future PSTA board, none of you included, I'm sure, and certainly not me, a future PSTA board levying a property tax allows the county to start a path toward eliminating the sales tax, potentially basically eliminating all local funding for PSTA and wiping PSTA out. It's sort of like Roundup. It's a provision. I called it. In addition, of course, the strategy that the county agrees with, the county agrees to support, is following the passage of Greenlight this coming November. PSTA and the county will together support the state legislature, again, completely eliminating the power of PSTA to levy a property tax, and then the provisions in this interlocal agreement related to that are then null and void because PSTA would not even have the power to levy the ad valorem tax. We think there's a better chance following the passage of Greenlight that the legislature will support that. It was supported and approved by the House and the Senate and vetoed by the governor previously. Number 2, there are all of the Greenlight Pinellas Plan's milestones, bus and rail, that are in our Greenlight Pinellas Plan are incorporated into the agreement, and PSTA is accountable for hitting those milestones. If we if we miss a milestone or get off track in some way, the agreement calls for a process by which the county and the PSTA will work together to first try to fix whatever the situation might be, or reduce the delays or whatever, and then ultimately, if nothing can be accomplished, a consultant is brought in and recommendations are given, and this can lead to ultimately the county making a decision on whether or not to pursue reducing or changing the sales tax, but through a process that will hold PSTA accountable. Number 3, in addition to the milestones and the property tax penalty, there are 6 what we call triggers, 6 things that can trigger a county commission for taking action to potentially reduce or eliminate the sales tax. Some of the triggers are automatic, like at the end of 50 years. At the end of 50 years, there will be a consideration by the county, which we think is appropriate, out then that whether or not the Greenlight Pinellas plan will be completed, the debt service will be paid, and whether or not there's a decision to either reduce or eliminate the sales tax or implement a Greenlight 2 or something else, that's for a different PSTA board and a different county commission to consider. Other things are if the PSTA board itself decides not to implement the Greenlight Pinellas plan, then the county has the right to start a process of reducing or eliminating the sales tax. So triggers like that are in place in this agreement. That again is another accountability measure that is very important that we're telling folks today. It is ensured that what we're saying out there is true. Number 4, and I know the planning committee had a lot of discussion about this earlier, the payments of PSTA to the county are delineated, and I feel very good about them, that they are understood. There is following the passage of Greenlight, PSTA will pay the county $100,000 for basically legal fees that they've incurred thus far in helping us to this point. And then PSTA will pay for certain defined county infrastructure usage as we implement the plan. Almost all of the rail and bus rapid transit routes where we're making substantial capital improvements are not county-owned roads, they're state roads or interstate. So we don't think it's going to be a huge issue, but wherever we might interface with county infrastructure, like on signals, signal preemption or whatnot, then that's defined as how we will pay for the county for usage of their infrastructure. And probably best of all, number 5, the county has agreed and was very strong on this throughout the entire negotiations about doing no harm along the way. I asked for these accountability measures to be included in the provision, but at the same time, we didn't want the accountability measures or the threat of something changing to make it harder for PSTA to be successful in implementing the Greenlight Pinellas plan. And so this interlocal agreement has been reviewed by multiple attorneys from both sides, by financial advisors from both the county and PSTA, from bond rating agency folks who have looked at it to ensure that while we have these different measures in the agreement, they're not going to hurt our ability to get low-cost debt financing once we go to the bond market. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Of course, Alan is here to answer questions. Also, Dwayne Draper from Bryant, Miller, and Oliver is here, who is our bond counsel and has been helping along for questions, most of which I can't answer, but these guys can answer.
Thank you, Brad, and this has been an incredible effort, and this interlocal is very strong. We've seen it several times. Both in terms of ensuring there will not be double taxation, but also the milestones and other provisions are very important. So I want to thank you and Brad, you and Alan and the entire team for your work on this. Ms. Bujowski, comments?
Yeah, I just, as Brad mentioned at the Planning Committee, we did spend the majority of our meeting talking about this and delving into the minutia details. A couple of concerns that we discussed, and they're no longer concerns, but just maybe an effort to save some questions here. We talked a lot about the tax itself and it being eliminated, and if the county were to intercede, if they could permanently lower our penny sales and what that negotiation might look like, and we worked our way through that and felt confident about that. The milestones seemed reasonable to us. We were concerned that, and just bear with me. Well, in the reduction and termination of the surtax, we were explained that in this particular situation of Greenlight, it can only be used for the Greenlight plan. And so at the 50-year anniversary and the Greenlight plan is completed, we would have to go out for another referendum to start over. My apologies. We spent a lot of time also talking about the fees, costs, and expenses. In as much as, are we going to get charged time and a half for someone's time spending doing, at the county level, doing things, and how can we ensure that we're fairly getting charged for costs? But there are statements in here that say that the county infrastructure be consistent with any other current design standards and the costs, so they can't charge PSTA more than they would charge anybody else, so we felt confident about that. We also felt that the no harm clause was important, that if a completely new county commission that hated this plan couldn't just come in and stop what we're doing and throw
Right.
wrenches into the process. Not that they would, and certainly not the current county, commission, but, you have to think about the process rather than the people. And we were especially happy that that there was a statement in there that said the county shall use its best efforts to ensure that at any time such permanent reduction is made, the reduction shall not exceed the amount of ad valorem taxes collected by PSTA in the immediate fiscal year. So again, the way things are worded, that it wouldn't be done harm to us. So we feel confident that we as an organization are protected, and we also feel that the general public, which is, is important to be protected, and we feel that the county on their end feels confident that what they are doing is ensuring that that the community is protected. I know that Mr. Johnson had a number of questions that he worked through, I think, with Alan. I don't know if you had any, as vice chair, if you had anything you wanted to add.
Mr. Vice Chair?
The chairman of the planning committee correctly characterized the meeting, and characterized the meeting as I expressed my concern that since I was not an attorney and Mr. Zimmett was not available at the time, that I wanted to get some clarifications. I did receive those clarifications. I also talked to our city attorney, who said, if Alan says it, it's right. You can trust him. So, and my questions were more related to the lack, some of the wording instead of what it said. It's just, some places it's kind of hard to read through the paragraph, but I guess that's
Written by lawyers.
You realize how many attorneys were working on this?
Yeah.
well, and maybe that's the problem, but anyway, I'm
Not there's
fully
anything wrong with
supportive of it at this point in time, and I just want to go on record for that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and Madam Secretary, thank you for the Planning Committee's diligence on this. Commissioner Newton.
Yes, I just want to, I want to thank Brad for coming down to present the St. Pete and my colleagues. I was at a debate between, I guess, no tax for track and yes for green light, and this came up about the interlocal agreement. What they're saying now, even though that you have it, and PSC can't benefit from a double taxation, it's still going to be a double tax in essence. Could you elaborate on what's to be done once this referendum is successful, as far as our abilities or our pursuit to move forward and get this taxing authority eliminated?
Yes.
Post.
Right. First of all, I think it's important to note that both the PSTA ad valorem property tax and the sales tax approved by the voters in November are restricted funds. The current ad valorem property tax can only be spent on public transportation as defined by the special act of that created PSTA. And the sales tax, because the Greenlight Pinellas plan is referenced in the ballot question, can only be spent on the Greenlight Pinellas plan. So if something that is we don't expect to happen, but if something happens that calls in play this agreement, and the county is holding funds, the county can't use them for anything else other than the Greenlight Pinellas plan. So that's first of all. Second, as I mentioned, the plan is following the passage of Greenlight Pinellas, PSTA will prioritize a legislative initiative that the county has agreed in the agreement to support to go back to the state legislature and again seek an amendment to the PSTA legislation, special act, that completely eliminates our ability to levy the property tax. What this does is zeroes out, eliminates the property tax. But what the state, and only the state can do, is eliminate PSTA's future ability to levy the ad valorem, and we think that will be successful. It was very successful 2 years ago. We think it'll be successful because it'll only be viewed as an elimination of the double tax.
Right. I just wanted to bring that up because even though the county has entered into an interlocal agreement and it's very fair both ways, the argument, I guess the misinformation is still that it's double tax, even though it'll be revenue neutral to PSTA because they have a sales tax. But that's not going to stop us from making sure that there's only one tax on the people, and that's only one tax that they're voting on. So making it purely a tax swap, not a double taxation opportunity for future board members or whomever. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Newton. Commissioner Dayton?
Yeah, I just, regarding double taxation, we're exactly in the opposite situation there, because if this is passed, when it is passed, our taxation from the ad valorem will stop as of the 1st of October, and we will not start receiving funds from the sales tax until probably January. Well, it'll start in January, but we won't get the funds till February, probably the end of February. So we're having a 5-month interval where we have nothing coming in, and we're going to be working off of reserves. So it is double taxation is exactly the opposite.
Great point. And of course, we have the authority to set the millage at 0, which we've said over and over we intend to do once Greenlight passes. Any other comments? Commissioner Mertz?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, I had your name down.
That's
Go ahead.
okay. That's all right. 2 questions. One is, as I read here, it was passed by the County Commission on June 3rd. If it passes today, is there anything other to do? No.
No.
Okay.
If it passes today, Chairman Welch will be signing the agreement today.
All right. And the second question is, I can appreciate the importance of the wording such that future commissions can't change, I guess, to alter the path. The question I have is, if we find something that needs to be changed in the future, the wording doesn't preclude that ability to make that change.
Absolutely not. I mean, PSTA and the county could agree to change the language at any time. What we did try to do is we had to recognize with PSTA relying upon this agreement to issue bonds and otherwise borrow money, that the county commission couldn't unilaterally change the agreement or reduce the funding so that PSTA would be in a position of not being able to operate and maintain the system and to repay the loans. So that's what I think Brad was referring to when he was talking about future county commissions can't change that portion of the agreement without PSTA's agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mertz. Commissioner Johnson?
Brad, that was awesome. You've been doing a fantastic job, and I'm really proud of PSTA, and I fully support Greenlight. Excited for the future, for my kids, for my grandkids, and everyone. But I have a question. If next year at this time, the members other than the county members decide they don't like something that's going on, because I fully expect that we're going to have that agreement in November is going to be 100%. How can the PSTA board go against part of its members, which is the county, to change things or to disagree with them? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, let me answer it first this way. let's just say the complexion of the entire county commission were to change, the county commission cannot unilaterally change the agreement without PSA board approval. And
But
there are 5 county appointees on the board, but there are 15 members. So this board would have to approve any changes to the agreement. Only if PSTA imposes an ad valorem tax can the county take any action. And that's after a process that requires us to meet with them and discuss. Or those triggers come into play, which is things like, well, 50 years is not going to happen in the next
Year or
quite a
two.
while, and even after 50 years, if the county decided to reduce the tax, they still have to leave enough money for PSA to operate and maintain the existing green light system. If PSA were to decide not to proceed with green light for some reason, well, then this board would be making that determination. And still, there's a process that requires us to meet with the county and to work through these issues before there's any permanent reduction in the tax. And then finally, there's that safeguard that says, even if they do go to reduce the tax, they can't reduce it below an amount that would affect PSTA's credit rating or leave not enough money to operate and maintain the system that is constructed. And Dwayne's here. If I made any misstatement on that, Dwayne will correct me on the public finance portion. But so I think we are certainly PSTA is adequately protected.
I just want to make sure that the wonderful thing about this board is that it represents not just the county, but it represents all the different entities in our county, which is unique with 24 cities and the county. So we're unique, but we're very separately represented. And I just want to make sure that that maintains, that it stays that way. We don't change
Oh, yeah.
the
And I
mission
think
to
the
start
agreement
with.
accomplishes that. I mean, I think that was one of our goals and I think the ultimate agreement that we reached protects the county from their standpoint, protects PSTA, protects PSTA's lending capacity, and protects the public and the representations that PSTA has made in support of green light. Those are also recognized and protected in the agreement. So I like to think from the lawyer standpoint and the financial advisor standpoint, who we worked with closely on both sides, we accomplished those 3 goals.
That was,
Thank you, Commissioner
that was
Johnson.
looking for.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Vice Chair?
Just to be absolutely clear, could you go through the dates that the ad valorem tax would terminate and the date that PSTA would begin getting sales tax? I think there was an implication that we would not be assessing ad valorem taxes beginning in October of this year. Is it this year or
Of
is
next
it
year.
But could you go
Yes.
through those?
Okay, so,
we understand that 5-year or five month.
okay, so following the passage of green light on November 4th, 2014 by the voters, this PSTA board will be meeting this time next year and be presented a budget, and then you will have an obligation to, like we do now, to set the millage rate or send out the trim notices by July 31st of 2015, and we will recommend, and you will likely, well, you, according to this agreement, vote that will be 0 a year from now. October 1, when the FY15 budget, or I'm sorry, 16 budget, 2016 budget starts October 1, 2015, about 15 months from now, that zero rate property tax will start. And so the property owners of Pinellas County will not be assessed a property tax for public transit starting on October 1. I think they get their bill around November, where they'll see that. They'll see it on the trim notice starting in August at 0. The sales tax will start being assessed in Pinellas County on January 1st of 2016. About, 3 months after the ad valorem technically goes away. And then, as Mr. Dighton said, the actual revenues from the sales tax are about a month or maybe almost 2 months in arrear afterwards that they'll start flowing into PSTA.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions or comments? We have one public comment. Okay, we'll take the public comment now. Ms. Barb Haselden.
Morning.
Morning.
I really just wanted, I know that what I have to say about this isn't going to, of course, affect any outcome. But in looking at the interlocal agreement, I think that it is absolutely true that it protects PSTA and it protects the county and it protects the bond market, but I don't think it protects the taxpayers. And I don't see any language in there that would say that down the road, let's say that PSTA starts to implement let's just say a $5 million ad valorem property tax. And according to the language, it appears that then they would be withheld $5 million from the sales tax. But that would still rest with the county. And even though the language states that that $5 million that PSTA has relinquished back to the county could only be spent on the Greenlight Pinellas venture, then what's to say that that doesn't still represent that the taxpayers have now been double taxed? Because the homeowners then would still be now having to start paying again an ad valorem property tax to the tune of the $5 million in addition to the full sales tax. And so therefore I don't see any protection, and you're looking puzzled, Ms. Johnson, but I don't see any protection in this, because I'm trying to get this clear too. I don't see any protection in this document that will automatically then return that $5 million to the taxpayers. And let's say that it's $30 million. Well, let's say that down the road, 10 years from now, that the sales tax doesn't perform just like it didn't in Charlotte. And so therefore the situation is in need of more influx of capital. Then what is to say that it couldn't be that 10 years from now that actually the ad valorem would be started again as an additional pot of money that would then be a double taxation, and those folks in the future are going to have a very fuzzy memory about how all of this started. And so I don't see a part of this document that has an automatic kickback to return any money that PSTA would start to charge again, whether it's $1 or $30 million, back to the taxpayers automatically. I believe that it would have to go back through referendum to reduce the ad valorem the sales tax, either entirely or partially, to match the amount of the ad valorem that had been reinstituted. So please correct me if I'm wrong, and when you talk about, well, this is all predicated on the fact that the legislative delegation is going to take this back to the legislature, I think that's been pretty clear that with the current composition of the Senate members, that's not going to happen. So I wonder what your response would be, Mr. Zimmett. What part of the contract guarantees a return to the taxpayers of any monies that PSTA would start to charge with ad valorem again?
Counselor.
What the agreement provides is that, first of all, the agreement gives PSA absolutely no incentive to impose an ad valorem tax because PSA will not obtain or receive any additional funds other than what is generated by the surtax. Number two, the county has the ability to permanently reduce the tax in the amount of any collections of ad valorem taxes that would have to be paid over or would be withheld by the county if PSA chose to impose the ad valorem tax again for some reason, which again, PSA would have absolutely no incentive or any reason to do that. So that's what legally can be provided. That's what's provided for in the agreement. And that's the way that double taxation can be avoided if the legislature and the governor does not wish to amend the legislation and take out the ad valorem taxing authority that PSTA has, which once the surtax passes, the incentive on the legislative delegation to not support that would seem to be contrary to the reason that they didn't support it 2 years ago.
Thank you, Counselor. Madam Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan, can you explain the process? Because we had the same question at the Planning Committee, and we got it answered. So for the benefit of those that might be watching, if PSTA, some future PSTA did implement the property tax,
If
would
a PSA board, for whatever reason, decided to impose the ad valorem tax, the county will, and let's just say it's $30 million. I think that's one of the amounts that was used by Ms. Haselden in her example. The county would withhold $30 million from the surtax funds that are paid over to PSTA. So,
would they not collect it, or would they withhold it from PSTA, and what would happen to that money?
in the first year, probably because of the timing, they would just withhold it. But then they would have the ability to go out and whatever methodology is legally available to them at that time, they could permanently reduce the surtax to an amount to equal the amount that PSA would be collecting in ad valorem taxes.
But what would happen to the money that's being withheld? It's just not collected, correct? That's the question. What's happening with the money that's being withheld?
It would still be collected. It would be held by the county.
And done what with?
They could either, well, it only can be used for green light purposes, so the county couldn't use it for anything outside of green light. So they could either reduce the tax further and then pay the money over to PSTA to equal out the amount. They could figure out a way to refund the money to people. I mean, we really haven't looked at what would happen. The fact is, the incentive, there is no practical reason why the PSTA board would ever issue the ad valorem tax, knowing that the net number is going to be the exact same, and that the penalty is that the tax can be permanently reduced.
So even if it is collected on both sides in a year, it cannot be used, the one tax will have to be reduced to accommodate the other. Correct? And so at any given time, if for whatever reason this double collection happens, it will then be reduced in the following year to accommodate for it, and where it will not be charged to the taxpayer.
Correct.
No, I don't think that's what he said.
I'm sorry?
That's not what you said, is
We're
it?
not going to have back and forth, Ms. Hazel, and this is a question from the Secretary, too.
It is. It is what he said.
Returned?
Ms. Hazelden, we're not going to have, you've had your 3 minutes.
Well, I
We're not
think
gonna
I've
have
made
back
my
and
point.
forth. Well, I'll make a comment in a second here. Commissioner Dighton?
I think probably the key is what Attorney Zimmett said. There's really a disincentive to pass a ad valorem tax, and I think what one of the questions might be, under what circumstances do you think that this board would elect to incur the deserved opprobrium of the public by passing a tax like that?
You can't receive the...
You're not going to make anything from it. You're just going to get anger.
Anger.
Thank you, Commissioner Dighton. Commissioner Newton?
I just want to ask, I know you mentioned a minute ago that the county is the authority that collects the taxes for all the municipalities and taxing authorities and then redistributes it. Is that correct?
It's actually the county clerk.
Well, that's part of the county. I'm just saying the county government is the one that the taxes pass through. When you talked about zero in the ad valorem, wouldn't that, in essence, not tax the people? If you get taxed at a zero rate, that's nothing, correct? Right. I mean, zero is zero. Right. So, I mean, the argument they're trying to make is even though that money is being collected and not being passed on the PSTA, the people are getting taxed on the revenue side and on the ad valorem. That's the argument they're trying to make. But if the interlocal agreement and the county has the ability to set that tax, that whatever tax that a rogue future board might try to pass a zero, that they wouldn't get anything. They wouldn't tax the people. Is that correct? Is that incorrect?
PSTA would have no incentive, right, PSTA would get nothing, get nothing. They would,
Right, but the
future
argument-
rogue PSTA board would not be able to do it.
Right, but the argument is being made that the people will still get taxed, even though it wouldn't go to PSTA. So they're getting taxed on ad valorem, even though say you get a majority of a future board agrees to raise it, I don't know, 3%. And then the people would still get taxed. It wouldn't come to PSTA, but they will get taxed. And they also pay a revenue tax. That's the argument they're trying to make, but I'm trying to understand. I thought if the county set that ad valorem to zero, wouldn't allow them to put a 3% tax in, no one would get taxed, because zero is zero. If I'm wrong, tell me. That's what I'm asking. Is that the proper?
That's right.
It is.
But it could happen prior to that. The only way it could happen would be prior to us setting it at zero, or not taking the action to set it at zero.
Okay. Because the argument they're trying to make is that, I know that everybody's saying it'll be net neutral and PSA wouldn't get it. The argument they're trying to make, and that's one that you clarified, and that we would go forward even after a successful referendum and make sure no one in the future can do ad valorem tax vis-a-vis for PSA. Is that if it happens, PSA won't get it, but people still got taxed for 1 cent and they got taxed on the house. That's the argument they're making, even though PSA won't get it. But what I'm saying is, I think, I don't know if I'm correct, that's what I'm trying to clarify from the county commissioners we have sitting here, is if you don't have an authority and you set, a future board sets it to 3%, can't the county set it to zero? And then it wouldn't tax
No,
them at all?
this board sets the millage.
No,
We've
we
said
set our own millage.
repeatedly, we're going to set it at zero next year if green light passes.
Okay,
So
and
this board, this elected board, this scenario, we should.
It's laughable.
It's hard to respond to every,
I know, but what,
Armageddon scenario
Yeah.
and try to be logical with it.
Bizarre.
We have no intent of levying a millage, period.
Right.
The county commission not only can reduce it, but can take steps to eliminate
Right.
the sales tax completely. That's the nuclear option. It's in there. So this scenario is, again, it's like the tinted windows. We can't spend a whole lot of time trying to respond to these
well, it's not,
crazy Armageddon scenarios
not-
that aren't factual.
right, it's not a response, Mr. Chair, it's just that, like I said, at the debate, that came up, and what happened is, before the interlocal agreement with the county, it's gonna be a double tax. And now after the interlocal agreement, it's just, you got a proponent that's morphing into more misinformation by saying that it's gonna be double taxation.
And it's going to continue until November.
I understand.
So get ready for the next.
But like I said, as a board, and the people that's gonna be voting to set that alone, we should let the
I
people watching know.
appreciate your comments.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
let them know
Commissioner
that.
Newton. Commissioner Long?
Thank you, Commissioner Welch, for your voice of reason and sanity in this conversation, which I'm sitting here thinking is almost laughable. There's 16 elected officials and people on this board.
Yes.
Now, granted, in any group that size, you might have, maybe one or two people that are just plain stupid. But to think that the whole entire body is going to impose a tax knowing you can't receive any benefit for it is just, I can't even wrap my head around that. And it's distressing to me to think that anyone in our beautiful county that has such an incredible quality of life could have that kind of far-fetched, stretched imagination it's laughable to me. And I really think that we have to work extra hard to keep our feet on the ground and be rational and reasonable, because this is just, it's hard, I can't even go there. So I just had to say, thank you for being so reasonable to remind us. This is not going to be the only time we hear this kind of outrageous what if.
Thank you, Commissioner Long. From now until November is going to be a battle about the facts and getting the facts.
And
to the
reason.
people. Absolutely. So stay calm and support green light.
I'll work on
Y'all
that.
have done an excellent job, and I do have to state also that the same folks that are talking about double taxation are the folks that urged the governor to veto the bill that would have assured that we had no taxing authority whatsoever, that did pass our legislature, House and Senate.
Yes.
And the governor vetoed it. I can't imagine that the next governor, if it's the current governor or if it's a new governor, is going to veto a bill when we've already passed a 1% surtax. So that will happen. So let's just stay confident. Y'all have done a great job on this. Alan, did you have another comment?
There was just a couple things, if I
Okay.
could clarify a few things that were said, or answer some questions that came up. One, I wanted to remind the board that on each project which would involve or have an interaction with county infrastructure, there would be a separate agreement to address the effect on the county infrastructure. So that would be coming back to the board each time, and you would see that as we have that interaction to determine how those fees are paid. I think somebody asked a question about what kind of fees are gonna be paid and how that's gonna be determined. So you'll see those agreements as there's a project that interacts or affects county infrastructure. The other thing I wanted to mention is Brad went through the process for talking about the reduction. We do intend to file, and there's an agreement that PSTA is obligated to file a validation procedure. So that process will relate to exactly at what time the board will be in a position to vote to impose no ad valorem taxes for the following year. We'll need that validation to be complete, so that we'll have, be assured that PSA will be collecting the sales tax beginning in January of 2016. I just wanted to make those couple of points, and I think you made the other point about the legislative delegation. The legislature would have no incentive to, when a governing body wishes to remove a taxing, its taxing authority, so to avoid any double taxation for the legislation, the governor would have no incentive not to be supportive.
Commissioner Marks?
Yeah, I just wanted to just get clarification or just confirmation. I think I've heard it a couple times, but as you said, from now until November, there'll be lots of discussions on facts. And my understanding, what I heard is that even if, doesn't make any sense to do it, but even if a future PSTA was to put an ad valorem in place, the documents that we have here in front of us would make it such that the county would mandatorily reduce the 1%. So it's not like even in that particular situation, you're not acquiring two pots of money. The total dollar amount would be the same if it would be some ad valorem, but then it would be a reduced penny to whatever the necessary percentage would be. Is that
Yes.
correct assumption?
Yes, we've got no incentive from a
Right.
PSTA perspective to have an ad valorem if this passes.
Okay.
None
thank you.
whatsoever. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the interlocal?
Move
So moved.
approval.
So moved.
Second.
You got that? Okay.
Everyone.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.